Welcome to our show. My name is Sarah Rickman, and I'm sitting in today for your regular host, Janet Tobabin. We are here to talk about Centerville Boy Scout Troop 116, the oldest existing Boy Scout troop in Centerville, Washington Township, a troop that recently held its 50th anniversary reunion. 50 years is a long time. The Centerville Lions Club has sponsored the troop for 47 of those 50 years. With me today are three men who represent 30 of those 50 years. George Darner, to my far left, was Troop Committee Secretary 1953 to 1955, when his two sons, Ron and Larry, were Boy Scouts. He went on to serve as co-advisor of the 116 Explorer Post until about 1960, and he's still active with the Centerville Lions. On George's right is Bill Matey, Scoutmaster of Troop 116 from 1975 to 1984, during which time at least a dozen young men rose to the rank of Eagle Scout, the highest rank a Boy Scout can achieve. His sons, Will and Dan, both were active with the troop, and Dan did earn his Eagle. And on my immediate left is Bob Belt, who is the institutional representative from the other troop sponsor, Centerville United Methodist Church. George, tell us a little bit about the troop in the 1950s, particularly about the bus and the bus trip.
Well, the Centerville Explorer Post belonged to a council which also had representatives from Kettering and Oakwood, and we decided to take a 3-week-long trip to Canada for a canoe trip. And in checking to find out best way to go, we found we couldn't afford to charter a bus, and existing transportation wasn't feasible from the time standpoint and also from the cost. So we decided to buy a bus. And we had the bus, we took the bus up all the way up there, went up through Detroit and up through Toronto and about 200 miles north of Toronto. We were to go on 3 weeks trip for that.
Something happened with the bus with the licensing, if I remember correctly. You ran into a problem?
Yeah, we paid $250 for the bus. And when we went to buy the license for the bus, we found it was going to cost $209, although we had written our charter to match the same wording that they had for the city buses. And the city buses had recently lobbied a bill through the legislature so that they would get a flat $10 fee. But ours didn't fit for some reason or other. Takes a lot of newspapers collecting to get $209 for the bus. So I contacted the politicians in the area, and the only one that helped me was Clara Weisenborn. She called me one Friday and says, be in my office at 8 o'clock Monday morning. And so I went up there, and she took me into a room and a big table, 32 people sitting around it. And she said, she got up and introduced me, and she says, Mr. Darner has a few words to say to you. She hadn't told me ahead of time that I was going to do the talking. So I explained to them that I knew about a lot of several organizations in town that had buses and trucks and other vehicles, but they couldn't afford to buy the commercial licenses they would need for them, so they didn't get to use them. There was, for instance, one thing I know that Goodwill had some dump trucks to pick up stuff, and they couldn't afford to use them on account of the bus cost, license cost. And the UAD had received a bus from Bond-Bright Distributing Company, and they had the same problem. They had the bus was for the purpose of hauling the football players to practice fields. And the bus sat there because they couldn't afford to spend that much money for the bus license. So one guy was sitting there scribbling on a paper, and he come up with words. He says, how would this be if we would put a piece of legislature through that would give the Boy Scouts a $10 fee? And I didn't take very kindly to that, and I told him it had to be all or nothing. We weren't up there to lobby for the Boy Scouts. We were to take care of all charitable organizations and nonprofit corporations and so forth. And so I ended up writing the wording for it. Then Claire took me down to Billy O'Neill's, Governor Billy O'Neill's office, and she had already talked to him about this, and he assured me that when the bill hit his table, that he would sign it within seconds, and he did so. So from that time on, we paid $10 a year for license plate.
Okay.
I quit the lobbying business right there.
You didn't push your luck on lobbying
No
after
way.
that. That was 1956, am I correct?
Right.
You had another project in 1956.
Yeah, the Centerville Lions came to us and offered to pay most of the cost of building a shelter. They called it the Scout Shelter, although it was for anybody's use in the township. It was to be in the Activity Center, which is off North Main Street. The proviso was that we had to collect material and donations from people and businesses in the area to flesh out the money to build the thing. And so that became my job too, to go around and talk to the various people on that. Now, I remember going into one man's office, and the receptionist says, "You'll have to wait a little bit, she has somebody in his office." And so I sat there and waited, and the door was open so I could hear what was going on. And some guy had come in there, and he was trying to beg some money or help. I don't know what the details were. But the businessman says, "I haven't got a lot of money to throw around to you guys. Get out of here." So he escorted him to the door. Then he saw me sitting there, and he says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I just heard what you told that man, and I'm here for the same request." And he said, "Well, come on in." So I went in his office, and I told him the whole story about it, and he said, "Sure, I can help." So he wound up donating all the blocks and all the steel window frames and steel door frames and the doors. And he even told me that when we got ready to build the building part, there was going to be 2 toilets and a storage room in between. We got ready for that block work. He would get his men to come down and donate the time, and they would do the block work and put in the windows and the doors, and he did so.
Fantastic.
The activity center is still in use, and the Scout Shelter is still in good shape. That was 37 years ago.
And the Activity Center is right off of 48,
Right.
behind, I think it's now, there's a bank there.
Yeah, the Lincoln Bank, I believe they call it now.
Okay.
Lincoln National Bank.
Okay. Bill, you took the Scouts on several exciting trips during your 9 years as a Scoutmaster. Why don't you tell us about some of them?
Well, there were numerous. Every month we'd have some kind of an outing, no matter what the weather was. So there's dozens of them. Just quickly, I guess we took a number of backpacking trips. One of which, I forget exactly where we started in Ohio, but it was about 55, 60-mile, 5-day trip with maybe 10, 12 boys. The 4th day out, I think it was, we had a severe storm. We were down south of Chillicothe in the Scioto Trail State Forest, and we found out the next day some trailers had been blown over. The wind, rain, we couldn't find a place to set up our 6 smaller tents because of this. We finally did get a little clearing, and ironically, the next morning, we were within a 1/4 mile of the lookout tower. If you're familiar with the state forest down there, we would have had wood and everything, and nice shelter to be sleeping in. That's one of them. Just some quick ones. We've gone caving. I think your husband had been with us on that down in Kentucky. 50 to 100-mile bike trips out one day and back the next day. Probably the biggest when my time was up, because of my boys getting out of the age group, was being a visiting troop at the 15th World Jamboree in Calgary, Alberta. That was in 1983. I think my wife helped me. We had 6 boys and Mr. and Mrs. Freeman, who were in their late 60s at the time, come with us. We didn't have a school bus like George, but we rented a 15-passenger van and a U-Haul trailer and took off. We sightseed the Badlands of South Dakota, Mount Rushmore, Yellowstone. In fact, we had some snow fall on our tents when we were in Yellowstone. That was in July. Then we worked north into the Canadian Rockies, took in Lake Louise and spent a few days as a visiting troupe at the World Jamboree, which was really a neat thing to see with all the different uniforms, some of them in kilts, the different style tents. From there we worked our way back to Glacier National Park and basically got blown out of the park. We were going to stay there one extra day, but the winds really got wild. That's the end of the big one.
You also took some boys to Philmont.
Oh yes, yes. There was a trip to Philmont. That's when your husband Dick, right, went to. He took boys. A training in, and there were what, 6 boys went on the trip. We. On the way on any of our trips, we'll usually do some sightseeing, so we took in, I think, at St. Louis, the Arch, and went up onto the Arch, spent a little time there. Then, of course, Kansas, there's not too much to see there. We stayed overnight at the Air Force Academy. Almost all military reservations will give the scouts some real nice tours and what have you. And then the boys got to backpack for 6 days in the Philmont Scout Ranch, which, gee, I forget how many square acres that is.
I remember it's big.
It's huge.
Square miles.
Yeah, it's square miles, not acres. It's unbelievably big, which was quite an experience for the boys. While they were doing that, I ended up trout fishing along the Cimarron River.
And you caught how many fish?
I think just 2, but they were good.
They were good, right.
They were great. That's probably the highlights of it as a scoutmaster.
I do remember that trip since I went along, since my husband Dick was the assistant who took the training, and I got to hike all 5 days that we were there and see part of New Mexico.
Oh yeah,
it was a wonderful experience.
We met you at the
Tooth of Time.
Colorado Springs is where we met you, picked you up, right?
Bob, the reunion. I'm sorry, you emceed the recent reunion gathering of Troop 116. Could you tell us a little bit, since that's our modern day history looking back, tell us a little bit about the reunion.
Well, I really had a pretty easy job. We had an excellent committee. You know, committees are sometimes camels, but this was a great group. And I was the one who hadn't volunteered for anything, so I sort of inherited the job of guiding that group. Very good representation. Your husband had done a super job in collecting the names of all of the boys and the leaders and putting them into a database, and from that we went out and sent invitations out. Had somewhere around 75 or 80 people, I believe, that evening who had come to the church. We had some real nice displays set up by year groups, along with some of the award presentations and a number of flags and banners and all sorts of things. We had an opportunity to introduce everybody, and that was really what the whole purpose of that Saturday evening activity was to get the people to recall the friends and so forth and talk to them, enjoy it themselves. So we had a pretty good time that evening.
Want to tell us a little bit about Sunday's activities as well?
Oh, sure. Sunday morning at the services of the church, we had an opportunity to make the 50th year charter presentation jointly to the Lions Club and to the Centerville United Methodist Church, both of whom are the current sponsors, as I think you mentioned. Did that at both services, and then in the afternoon we had a court of honor, although I did not MC that, and very nice presentation, and some dignitaries in for that one.
I believe, let's see, we had State Representative Bob Corbin, who gave us a proclamation from the state, from the House of Representatives and from the governor. Dr. Richard Hoback from the Centerville Schools, Terry Blair, president of the Washington Township Trustees, and Brooks Compton, deputy mayor of Centerville, standing in for Shirley Hines, the mayor. And all of them brought proclamations for us as well.
Missed one other item is Bob Zachrich had made arrangements for a flag flown over the Capitol presented to the troop. We had that as part of the flag ceremony in the Court of Honor.
Bob being one of the Eagle Scouts from the early 80s, who is now working for a congressman in Washington, D.C. Okay. Several names well known around Centerville have been connected with Troop 116 over the years. School Superintendent C.L. Stingley and Centerville High School coach, football coach George Howe were adult leaders of the very first troop, the very first 116 troop in the early 1940s. And on our set today is one of the Troop 116 uniforms from the early 1940s. I don't know if you all can pick that up or not. Among the scouts of the past are the names of Bob Gregg, Centerville's winningest football coach ever, actor Gordon Jump of WKRP in Cincinnati, and Ken Parks, who is currently Deputy Chief of the Washington Township Fire Department. But two names stick out above all the others in our troop activities. They are Jim Poppleton and Kim Dieter. And we have with us here a picture of Jim Poppleton with Bill Matey when Bill was Scoutmaster. This was with an article in the Centerville Bellbrook Times. Adult leader Jim Poppleton was an inspiration to 25 years' worth of Scouts through his love of the outdoors and his devotion to Scouting ideals, the adherence to which he demanded of the young men he worked with in the troop. And Kim Dieter, we have a picture of Kim. He was a Scout in 1960-1961 and was a Vietnam War hero who gave his life on the battlefield in Southeast Asia. A Troop 116 Award for Excellence in Scouting perpetuates his memory, and Bob is holding the award to my left, and Bill is holding pictures of Kim. Only 5 young men since 1969, when the award was started, only 5 of the Scouts from 116 have earned that award. And they are Mark Whitney in 1969, Jim Krupar in 1979, yes, Bob Zachrich in 1983, Steve Voudris in 1984, and Mike Stamp in 1987. Bill, you knew Jim Poppleton pretty well. Why don't you, I'm going back to Jim now. Would you tell us a little bit about Jim and working with him?
Oh, yes. Jim was an amazing man. He was already on his retirement when I got to know him, medical retirement due to Parkinson's disease. And he inspired not only the boys with his ability of the outdoors and never say die, no matter what the weather was or no matter what, he was ready to go and continue on. The man was just unbelievable. It was near his end when he actually went on one of these 55, 60-mile backpack trips through the hills of southern Ohio. The boys would laugh at him sometime, but it just never amazed, they would never cease to be amazed about him. I guess George knew him quite well. I don't know if you've got any.
Yeah, I knew him almost from the time we moved to the township until the day he died, and we were great friends.
Did you do some camping with him also, George?
Oh, yes.
Fill us in.
Camping and driving.
Since you really worked with Jim in his early years with the troop, and Bill worked with him at the end, why don't you all compare some notes there? Tell us about some of the trips you took with him.
Well, most of the trips I took with him had to do with camping in the neighborhood, either Cricket Holler and out at Woodland Trails. And I remember one time we went out there for Order the Arrow. We both got the Order the Arrow at the same time. and that was unbelievable because the chores we got. You're supposed to work. They're supposed to work you until you drop. That's part of being on the Order of the Arrow. And our detail was to clean out the chicken houses and tear them down. And if you've never been around a chicken house, it's not been used for about 20 years. And every time you touch anything, the dust goes every place. And it was a weekend of sneezing and coughing, and it's a wonder some of us didn't get sick. And it got awfully cold. Another nice thing about the Order of the Arrow ordeal is that you get to sleep on the cold, hard ground with no blankets, no ground cloth or anything. I still remember it. That was a good 35 years ago.
Did you take the trip in 1959 with Jim and the Scouts out to Colorado Springs?
No, I was not on any of those Western trips.
Okay, I remember him telling about that trip, and Bill will remember the same thing. That two things happened. One, the brakes went out on the bus at one point, and
that was a common complaint.
It was.
This bus. The guy who sold it to me didn't tell me that it was a military bus, and we didn't find out till later. And as most of you know, military things they're built for the military, and if you want to get parts for them, it's real rough. And it had the brake system on that was part hydraulic and part pneumatic, and there was only one place in town that knew anything about fixing them. I was lucky enough to find that one, and that solves part of our problems.
Okay. I believe when they went to Colorado Springs, which was for either the National Jamboree, it was National Jamboree. Sure. Mm-hmm. They took the bus up Pikes Peak, and I guess it was never the same after that. From the tales they told. But
well, the bus was 10 years old when we bought it.
At that point,
means it was 15 years old then.
By then,
there was no spring chicken.
Well, I guess at one point, I don't know if it was the brakes or something else that went wrong, but talking to Mrs. Poppleton at the reunion recently, she said that one of the men from the town in Colorado where they'd stopped was not Colorado Springs. It was, I think, up on the Great Divide. I think they took the bus over the divide with the kids, and they had more problems. And she said that
I think that was a fuel pump problem.
The fuel pump, that's what it was. It was the fuel pump. But someone from the local area rode with Jim 85 miles, or took him 85 miles to get a new fuel pump, and then brought him back. And she said that was above and beyond the call of duty for someone to do that. It was that same trip that Jim stopped at a restaurant with the boys, and they all went in and had their meal, and as they were leaving, the restaurant owner told Jim that was the best behaved, nicest group of young Scouts he had ever met. And Joanne Poppleton said that Jim just puffed out, that just told him that what he had been doing with them was right.
We all had memories of that.
Very good. Okay. Bill, think back on a few of the trips that you took with Jim, or maybe might want to even tell about when the Scouts went and did the work project at their house when Jim was quite ill.
Oh yeah,
cooked dinner out and all.
Right. We had there was two projects. One, or was that tied in? I can't recall exactly, but they had a couple of acres of land with a creek that went over the back, and Jim could not cut the grass anymore by then. Mrs. Poppleton, Joanne, would need to use the riding lawnmower, which she enjoyed anyhow, but the bridge would not hold the riding lawnmower anymore, and it needed about a 10-15 foot bridge to be built to withstand the weight of the riding lawnmower. And I guess at the same time, if it wasn't the same time, it was another outing where we cooked 3 turkeys for Thanksgiving.
Same outing.
It was the same. I thought it was. I wasn't sure. And the turkeys, thanks to your husband, we cooked outside. He came up with a way where we kind of had a vertical spit with charcoal, 3 or 4 mounds of charcoal and the turkey suspended in between it, and this was all wrapped in aluminum foil, so it was actually roasting the turkeys. And Jim, even though he had to be fed with a tube, got about the biggest smile I've ever seen on anybody. Remember, George, how he liked to eat anyhow, no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, he could no longer taste the food, but he was just happy seeing what all was going on.
Right. The whole troop turned out for that, if I remember.
think
Not just the boys, but all the parents, all the kids, all the siblings. The grounds were crawling with Troop 116
right?
people.
Let's see, about Jim. The backpacking trip, that trip that he did make with us, Joanne didn't really want him to go, but there was no stopping him, and I don't know how many times he fell with his 30, 40-pound pack on his back. About the third day out, he finally let us separate some of his weight and that, but he wouldn't even let the boys help him set up his tent. He'd have to set up his own tent right there at the end. And that's what I meant before. The man was just amazing.
I do remember at Jim's funeral that the entire troop turned out as an honor guard or color guard for him. We had, if you remember, prior June, we had the Poppleton's 40th wedding anniversary and the troop's 40th birthday 10 years ago. And at that time, we presented him with one of the old troop flags.
Right.
And I do remember that was buried with him along with his red beret that we all remembered him for. Bob, the reunion is not really over. Tell us what Troop 116 and the reunion committee are planning now.
We had an opportunity to work with the city of Centerville in developing a scout focus area at Bentham's Grove, and the troop committee has purchased bricks in the name of Jim Poppleton and Kim Dieter, and we'll combine that with a bench that was donated to us by the Centerville Evening Optimist Club, and hopefully a tree, and develop a memorial area there at the pond at Bentham's Grove. There's also some future possibilities that we may be able to even build a greater focus area with a bridge, but Jim Ruppert and I have been discussing that with the architect there, and looks like a very neat project for scouting in the Centerville area, because this would represent not only Troop 116 as the kickoff from the 50th year, but also all of the scouting troops, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cubs in the area, and would be there at our Bentham's Grove area for the city of Centerville. So we think that's pretty neat.
Right. Something that will remind us of scouting forever. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your scouting experiences with us, and thank you all for watching A Mnemonic Interval.